we're going to be having three presentations today. We've had a little bit of a change round on the published program because of some technical challenges. So we'll be starting off with Dr. Carmela Ferrara, talking with their presentation, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Immigration and Reception, Southern Perspective, the Neapolitan Case Study. I was just going to say a few words of introduction before handing over. So Dr. Ferrara is coordinator of the Migrantino and author of the book Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Immigration and Reception. Their presentation is going to present an overview on LGBTI asylum claimants in the south of Italy, featuring some data and examples from the Neapolitan experience. And we're very excited to hear more, so I'll just pass over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this introduction. So I'm, as you already said, I'm Carmela Ferrara and I'm coordinator of Migrantino. So Migrantino is an help desk for LGBT immigrants, stateless, asylum seekers and refugees. And we are part of Antino Arcigay Napoli, that is an LGBT Italian association. So the majority of the beneficiaries of our desk come from the West Africa. As you can see, the majority of them are young adult, bisexual and gay men. And in the last 2 years, we just had 5 women and 1 transgender man who came to our desk. So where they come from? So these people come from all the south of Italy. We are in Naples and they come from Molise, Basilicata region, but sometimes they also come from Puglia region. So as you can see on the left, this is our association. We are in the heart of the historical centers of Naples, and the majority of our beneficiaries come from some rural areas in Calabria and in Campania region, and some of them works in the agricultural sector. So no longer just a service. In the last years, the participation of migrants in our youth group has increased, reaching up almost the 40% of the participants. And so this is a picture. We were going to a demonstration against racism, and our guys were writing some board to be recognized as LGBT immigrants community. So what we think basically is we have to rethink our inclusive space in order to make our activities accessible. So for example, we organize some laboratories of cinema in English and in French, and some meetings with psychologists who are specialized in group therapy and in artistic therapy, so to encourage everyone to participate, maybe to get over the linguistic barrier, for example. So this is a personal story. Of course, it's anonymous. In our equipe, there is me, that I'm the coordinator, but we also have some lawyers and psychologists, and of course, cultural and linguistic mediators. So this is a paper wrote by our psychologist for one guy to his territorial commission for his claims of asylum. And what we can read here is that this guy show his will to share his story. And in fact, he organized one meeting within our youth group to speak about his experience in his home country about the story of violence and homophobia in Nigeria. So we think that sharing is very important. Many migrants ask us to can share their story in a safe space into our youth group. And let me quote Hannah Arendt. As Hannah Arendt said, rebuilding a personal identity is a task that cannot be entrusted to the individual, but to the work of an entire community. Because only by feeling part of a whole, everyone can feel part of a humanity that lives in the plurality of identities. So what we can see is that in the recent years, the number of services for migrants in LGBT Italian Association has increased, but the majority of them are in the north. In fact, in the south, there are still few spots. There are us, and there is another one in Sicily. So yeah, this is a challenge for us because as I already showed, we work with the whole south of Italy, even if, for example, in Puglia, some spots are burning. Yeah. So we believe that we need a paradigm shift in our association from a paternalistic attitude to a prioritization of migrant voice. So I think this is a challenge for us as a LGBT Italian Association, and our responsibility is to encourage the participation of migrants by recognizing them space and representation. In fact, what I hope is that the next coordinator of Migrantino can be a migrant and not me. So basically, our suggestions and proposal is to create a national network of migrants activists, and maybe to organize a forum to exchange good practices, maybe create a common project between the North and the South, and to connect with Europe. So we are available to start a communal dialogue. So for some ideas, you can write us, and that's it. So thank you for your attention, and thanks to Sojica for increasing knowledge on this topic.
Oh, great! Thank you so much. That was very within time. Thank you. Very quick wrap up. Let's see. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm trying.
So the little button at the top.
Okay. Pause share. Okay. Stop share. Yes, I did it.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Now, Carolina, are you feeling confident about going ahead? We can't quite hear you, so it might be. I think you need to unmute.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna give a very short introduction, if that's okay for you start. So this is our second presentation, title of which is Best Practice in the Reception of Trans Asylum Seekers and Refugees in Italy, the Case of Casa Caterina. And our presenter is Dr. Carolina Versi, an adjunct professor of cultural anthropology at the universities of Siena, Naples, and Bolzano. She received her PhD in social and cultural anthropology from the University of Messina in 2017, and has conducted extensive fieldwork in southern Italy and Samoa with queer indigenous people at the crossroads of indigenous gender experience and LGBTQI rights. Between 2018 and March 2020, Carolina pursued fellowship-funded research in Bologna, focusing on the gender policies and reception practices addressed to trans asylum seekers and refugees within the Italian reception system. And unfortunately, Carolina's co-presenter, Valentina Coletta, is unable to join us today because of technical issues, which is something that happens with these online conferences. But just to recognize that Valentina is the co-presenter of this and has contributed. And thank you to you both for rapidly bringing the presentation together so that we can present without Valentina being able to join us. So I'll hand over to you now, Carolina.
Okay, I'm going to share my. Okay, thank you, Siobhan, for your kind introduction. And I'm sorry, I was supposed to share my time with Valentina, who can't do it with us. So I'm going to try to propose also her voice. I mean, this this paper was conceived and was prepared as a shared, as a form of restitution of a shared work which we conducted together. She as a social operator, as a peer operator within Casa Caterina, and from my point of view as an anthropologist. So I'm going to give you just few information. I'm gonna switch on, you know, the things we already know about what's the legal framework within which SOGI asylum claimants can be granted asylum. And I'm going to switch to the Italian legislation, which since 2015 recognized the special needs of SOGI asylum claimants hosted within the reception system. The reception system in Italy was conceived between 1999 and 2000, but came in force in 2002, and it was conceived as a two-folded, two-folded system with a first and second reception, and we are going to see a case of with the so-called second reception. So a SPRAR system. SPRAR means asylum seekers and refugees protection system, and it is a system within which people can be hosted in structures of less, or I will say less or more big entities with a certain number of beds, and in this specific case, Casa Caterina, which is a SPRAR structure specifically dedicated to transgender people, have a disposition of 4 beds in total. So it is a very, you know, little experience. So we had in our law the recognition of the special needs for people who are granted asylum on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, along with other vulnerabilities. I mean, people who went through physical violence, or minors, and so on. Okay, nonetheless, we notice, as also Nina Held and Moira Dustin stressed in their papers on particular social group, that UNHCR's guidelines reproduce an idea of sex, gender, and sexual orientation as fundamental aspects of human identity that are either innate or immutable, which is somehow, you know, I will say a particular perspective, a Western and somehow white perspective on gender identity and sexual orientation. Okay, just a few words about MIT, Trans Identity Movement, who was founded in 1979 and was I will say the first association in Italy to fight for transgender rights and for the visibility of transgender people. On the 14th April of 1982, Trans Identity Movement, which at that time was transsexual Italian movement, led to the approval of the Law 164, which is the law that in Italy regulates the amendment of sex assignment, thus allowing the gender affirmation path. At that time, MIT was fighting not only for the recognition of trans identity, but also for ensuring the respect for trans life and for trans self-determination, being able to plan, making trans people being able to plan their own lives. Since 1990s, MIT has been offering to trans migrants, especially human trafficking and sexual abuse victims from South America, some sort of services. Due to political and economic changes in Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East, MIT also faced with the challenge to give support to asylum seekers and refugees. And since 2018, it established, a specific service addressed to SOGI asylum claimants. In 2018, it was possible also to start to build the first reception structures addressed to transgender people and to trans asylum seekers and refugees. This project was called Rise the Difference and was carried out by MIT in collaboration with the Cooperativa CIDAS and Centro Risorse LGBTI. The structure, it was a UNAR funded project. UNAR is the National Office for Against Racial Discrimination, which funded this project, but also, I mean, the project had alternate in some way up and downs during the process of its implementation. Since its opening in July 2018, the structure hosted 4 trans people coming from different countries, from Russia, Cuba, Armenia, Pakistan, and then also from Brazil. And it was structured among some, with a specific organization, which that we are going to see in a minute. Since its opening, from the very beginning, Casa Caterina has been part of the reception system led by the Italian Ministry of the Interior. And when the project Rise the Difference ended, when it came to an end, Casa Caterina started to be managed directly by Cooperativa CIDAS, with just the collaboration of trans identity movement. So, you know, there's something like a shift in the management organization of the structure. Okay. I mean, also from the end of the project, there is the difference. MIT has implemented its services addressed to trans people with the help desk and facilitating the care of transgender asylum seekers and refugees. Okay, so I'm now going to switch to what is something I'm a little bit more familiar with, because it was my research and my journey within this project. As Siobhan already stressed, between October 2018, so just a few months after Casa Caterina effectively opened, I had the chance to conduct an ethnographic fieldwork in Bologna and to follow, the up and downs. So I just tried to show to you. And it was, first of all, it was an ethnography of the reception system, but simultaneously it was an ethnography of the institution. I was primarily interested in the operators' gates, in the ways in which they reproduce, in ways in which our own categories impact on the lives, on the lived lives of transgender refugees. And I was fascinated by this combined provision entailed, on which the project itself was structured. So on the one hand, the asylum law and at the national and European level, and on the other hand, the law 162 I mean, the law for the amendment of sex assignment, and a court verdict from the Court of Milan allowing gender affirmation also for foreign citizens. So, I mean, it was kind of a combined, in some way it was a combined provision, you know, something that come together to acknowledge the possibility of transgender refugee to be recognized as citizen, to a full citizenship. Within the reception system in Italy, transgender people find themselves, within this combined provision, transgender people find themselves concerned with the need to negotiate not only the refugees' rights, but also their sociocultural ideas of sex and gender, which won't necessarily correspond to LGBTQI ideals and representation we are familiar with, as Siobhan stressed in her presentation during the panel on activism a few minutes ago. Transgender refugee, as I mean also gay and lesbian refugees, need to reproduce a standardized repertoires of practices, representation, and experiences that are conceived as the practices, the representation, and feeling and experiences assigned to pertinent in some way to trans life. They need to prove their credibility through their bodies and to embody gender in a cultural experienced way. And this is the case not only in when they have to face the territorial commission in change for the result of their application, of their asylum application, but also when they go through the psychologist who release the report that allow them to hormone replacement or hormone replacement therapy, or also when they go through when they go through the judge who have to assess to allow the legal procedure for gender affirmation. Sometimes transgender refugees need to witness their credibility also within the reception system. And my fieldwork highlighted to what extent this was true also in the case of Casa Caterina, prompting me to identify to the top shift from Rise the Difference to the CIPROIMI structures, to the SPRAR structure, something like a watershed. I mean, in fact, external funds had made possible to provide services like makeups and other essential goods that are not granted anymore by the reception system, and which is even more true after the Salvini decree was approved in December 2018. The reduced collaboration within the equipe increased the risk of reifying gender, but also race and cultures, and social operators' views of trans experiences tended to reproduce a specific trajectory from one gender to another, delimited by culturally defined sets of practices and desires. So I'm gonna switch on the methodologies, and I'm coming quickly to my conclusion. Through ethnographic methodology, I could assess not just the increasingly, I mean, I I could assess not just how with the switching from Rise the Difference to Casa Caterina, the trans refugees hosted within the structure were implicitly asked to reproduce, to embody the unsuitability of the gender assigned at birth, reproducing certain gestures that are perceived as genuinely trans. They have been also subjected to moral evaluation for not wearing certain clothes or using too much or too less makeup, for performing certain gender duties as cleaning or assessing particular aspiration. Light and shadows in some way. Aesthetics, on the one hand, need to be assessed, I mean, wigs, binders for transgender men needs to be assessed as medical supplies, socio-medical supplies, and need to be provided as free. And then, the peer operators and self-help groups contribute to create a community of practice and play a key role in the anticipatory experiences of gender affirmation path. The role of multi-professional equipe composed by peer operators, skilled health professionals, and cultural mediators, as well as by figures like the counselor or the anthropologist who played a key role within the management of the conflict in the structures, are also very important to address. So to avoid the risk to essentialize and racialize trans experiences and to reproduce cultural stereotypes, it would be important to eventually in the reproduction in the reproduction of this pivotal project, it would be important to adopt a dialogical approach, assessing the needs of trans refugees and acknowledging that they can vary through the process, adopting an harm reduction policy in relation to sensitive issues like hormones and sex works, and it would also be very important to train social operators and to also heal professionals, operators of the reception system, employers and officers to facilitate also the exit trajectory from the reception system of trans refugee, and maybe we can go a little bit deeper during Q&A. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carolina. I'll let you go a little bit over time because the previous panel was so short. No, but you did an amazing job, and as I say, last minute change of plan. Thank you so much for dealing with that so well. As mentioned, we're having the Q&A at the end. And so we'll just move on now to our final presentation, which will be from Jo Wilding, Dr. Jo Wilding. The title is UK Legal Aid Reforms and Their Impact on SOGI Asylum Claims. And it'll be presented by Dr. Jo Wilding, who is an ESRC postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Brighton and a barrister at Garden Court Chambers in London, where Jo practices in asylum and immigration, including trafficking, unlawful detention, and damages for false imprisonment. Jo's 2019 publication, Droughts and Deserts, a report on the immigration legal aid market, is a really important insight into the economics of the current immigration legal aid market in England and Wales. And I'll pass over to Jo now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siobhan, and thank you to everybody, and well done, Carolina, for stepping up like that. That's never easy. As was said in the last panel, a lot gets said about the legal process, which is a very small part of the life of a person travelling abroad as a refugee or asylum seeker, but it does have huge significance. And so I wanted to talk about the impact of legal aid reforms in England and Wales and how they impact on SOGI asylum claims. So a person claiming asylum on any basis has the right to legal aid for their application and their appeal. And the Lord Chancellor, who's the Minister of Justice in the UK, must secure the availability of legal aid. So that's a legal duty to ensure legal aid is available. But the changes to legal aid in recent years have made that precarious. Now that applies to all asylum seekers, but there's a particular impact on any complex claim or claim where it's difficult for the client to build trust in their legal representative or to disclose information to their legal representative. So that particularly affects SOGI based claims. There are some countries where you're more or less going to get asylum if you're from there, Eritrea, Syria, South Sudan, for example, and you can get away with the representative doing fairly minimal work, but that's not the case with SOGI claims. So it's based on my empirical research with peer recognised high quality asylum practitioners and some follow-up work. This was case studies of not-for-profits, private firms and publicly funded barristers doing asylum and immigration legal aid work. And I looked at those that are peer recognised as doing high quality work, so in practitioner guides, on peer review and via my own research advisory group, so that these would be practitioners who were well placed to reflect on what stops them doing good quality work within the legal aid regime. For those that are not UK based, we have a split profession here. So we have solicitors and accredited caseworkers, who I refer to as providers, and anyone wanting to do legal aid work in that category has to obtain a contract from the legal aid agency, which is a government agency, whereas barristers are advocates and they get instructed by those providers for court work and for specialist advice work, and they're sort of at a bit of a distance from the legal aid agency. So we have fixed fees for most asylum legal aid work, and the big problem is that those don't cover the amount of work that's needed. Sorry, I just realised I forgot to start my timer. So hopefully this will all work. The problem is that the legal aid fixed fees don't cover the amount of work that's needed to represent a client effectively at each stage of the case. So, oh, no, I can't work out how to, oh, here we go, I have to do that, sorry. So this is an example of a real case where the costs and the payments in an asylum application, the fixed fee for the application stage is £413. You only escape that fixed fee scheme if your work costs 3 times the fixed fee or more. So that would mean going to £1,239. And in this particular case, the profit cost, the cost of the provider's work was £1,020. So you can see they're being paid £413. They sustain a loss of £607 on this one case. They lose well over double, almost 1.5 times what they're actually paid. And the solicitors in my study said that their average case cost double the fixed fee. For barristers, they said the simplest cases were costing 1.5 times the fixed fee. And for one centre that I studied, their 2 cheapest cases cost about £60 more each than the fixed fee. And this was where the Home Office granted asylum quickly. The same applies to barristers. Don't worry too much about the actual figures, but it's a fixed fee of £302. And the problem is that by reference to these nominal hourly rates, the actual cost of doing even a simple case was about £450. So unless these cases were escaping the fixed fee, they were losing, even on the simplest of cases, almost £150. But that might not look like much when you compare it to the 600 that the solicitor was losing. But if you multiply this by several days a week, several cases a week, week after week, it means that good quality lawyers are making significant financial losses every time they take on a legal aid case. So if you do the work that the case needs, you lose money. And most of the providers in fact, all of the providers that I studied were cross-subsidising from other work. So they were subsidising their legal aid work either with private client work if they were private firms and barristers, or with grant funding if they were not-for-profits. But inherent in that is that there's a limit to subsidy. So you have to limit your losses from legal aid work to what you can raise in subsidy from other sources. So the high quality providers were limiting their total capacity to limit their losses, or they were prioritizing work other than fixed fee work. So for example, unaccompanied children, detention cases, and they were turning away fixed fee cases, which means nearly all first-time adult asylum applicants, which creates an explicit conflict for providers between their own financial viability, the quality of the services they provide for their clients, and keeping access open for their clients. So that means it's almost impossible for a first-time adult asylum seeker to get taken on by a high-quality provider, even if they have a complex case like an SOGI-based case. And what I found was that other representatives that didn't meet the quality criteria often appear to cap the amount of work they do at the level that they're going to be paid for on the fixed fee. So that has an obvious adverse impact if you're limiting the amount of work you do on anyone who has a complex claim, who's maybe afraid to disclose the basis of their claim, or when their claim is going to be difficult to evidence. So the evidence of people capping the work was that, first of all, 2 of my interviewees had been explicitly told when they went for job interviews, we don't go to escape fee, we don't go over the fixed fee, we don't commission expert reports. But it was also in the accounts of what I refer to as escapees from other firms. So people that I interviewed in my case studies who had previously worked at poorer quality providers and had come out of that scenario, but also from an official from the Ministry of Justice who said, well, we ask providers to tell us how long it actually costs to do, how much it actually costs to do the case, how much time they actually spend, even when they're billing at the fixed fee. And as he put it, most of them come in within the fixed fee. So he took that as evidence that the fixed fee was about the right level and that the case demands were really quite uniform, rather than as evidence that people were capping the amount of work they do. So again, this applies to all asylum seekers, but the impact on SOGI cases is likely to be severe. And I think if people have been to any of the credibility panels during the conference, you'll be aware SOGI clients are dealing with stigma, with shame, with reluctance to disclose. So Alan Briddock on Tuesday talked about this multi-layer marginalisation that makes it more difficult for people to disclose and evidence their cases. There's no kind of evidential silver bullet. It takes time to prepare a detailed witness statement and to thoroughly explore what other evidence might be available. So since the case of HJ Iran, the Home Office commonly refuse people on the basis they don't accept that the applicant is gay. One of the solicitors that I interviewed had 2 clients coming up to appeal, both gay men from Bangladesh. And in the first one, the Home Office said, we accept that you're gay, but gay men are not at risk in Bangladesh. And in the second, they said, we accept that gay men are at risk in Bangladesh, but we don't accept that you're gay. So, you know, don't expect any consistency in decision making. Obviously, that first scenario is much easier. It can be dealt with by country background research and an expert report, whereas the one where they don't believe the applicant is gay is much more difficult. But either way, they demand an investment of time that just isn't possible within that fixed fee. And all of those problems are seriously exacerbated by the shortage of asylum legal advice available in many regions of the UK. So this is the map of where there are asylum providers in the UK as of last February. The grey areas are where there are no asylum legal aid reps at all. So you can see huge swathes of the country where you simply can't access asylum legal advice. In the red areas, there is one provider. So again, quite a few of those. For people not familiar with the British UK asylum system, people seeking asylum are dispersed and accommodated anywhere in the UK on a no-choice basis. So they don't get to choose where they go, but the placement of where people are is not necessarily the same as where legal advice is available. So I've been doing some work in Plymouth, which for those who don't know is down here in the southwest corner, and it's this big, Devon is this big red area and Plymouth is within that. There is one asylum representative there, one single person in one single room office. So she has a capacity of just over 100 cases a year. Now those wouldn't all be asylum cases. She's also working on family reunion and resettlement for people with refugee status. But there are 350 people a year dispersed to Plymouth to make their asylum claims. So support groups describe calling every single provider in the Southwest and South Wales, where it would appear that there are more providers available, and still being unavailable to find any providers that can take on their clients' cases. And that includes Plymouth Domestic Abuse Service, their migrant women's support worker described ringing every single provider and not being able to find anyone that could see her clients within the time that they had available for making their application. So obviously, again, this is applying to all asylum seekers. It's not only SOGI cases, but what it means is that, first of all, they have no choice of representative. They have to go to whoever can take them, whether or not that's someone who has knowledge of how to deal with these cases well. They might have to travel a long way. So the nearest providers are 120 miles away in Bristol. If no one there can take them on, it's kind of 150 miles to get to South Wales. That means that they might only get to meet their representative remotely. Or if they get to meet them once, then they'll be doing most of their appointments remotely. And that makes it extremely difficult to build up the trust and the relationships that you need to be able to disclose what's going on. And also people documenting quite serious adverse effects on mental health for people down in Plymouth when they're waiting a long time to find a representative or not feeling able to trust the representative. So I said in the abstract I would conclude with some suggestions for ways that support organisations can help clients. It's very difficult in the current context. Moral support is one really big thing, but knowing who is good and will aim to go beyond the fixed fee and developing robust referral relationships with them is really important, but also capacity building. If you have no choice of who the reps are going to be for your clients, then helping them to understand good ways of working with SOGI applicants, a bit of training that involves the voices of people that have been through the process would be really useful. And where necessary, helping with complaints about representatives. But ultimately, the bigger issue is the Home Office needs to change its decision-making process, and the Lord Chancellor needs to comply with that duty to make sure legal aid is available. And for that, we're going to need, I think, to pursue the possibilities in Section 2 of the Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act, which is the act that determines legal aid funding. So some of us are looking at kind of pushing the Lord Chancellor to exercise those powers. And what we need for that is to build the evidence of this market failure, to build the evidence of the difficulty in referring people, the difficulty in getting access for clients to proper legal representation, the evidence of the Lord Chancellor's failure to make sure legal aid is available, either by places or by particular types of case. So making sure there's proper funding that actually facilitates good quality representation that's actually available all the way through the country. So that would be my kind of wish for people to sort of support with. This has been a real kind of gallop through, but if you do want more information about what's going on in the legal aid market and why legal aid changes are having this impact, my report's available on my website and there's my Twitter, and thank you. I think I'm done.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. I mean, Jo, thank you for your presentation, but thank you so much, everyone.